The purpose of my research is to discuss how social media influences social lives and personal interactions, whether they are friendships or romantic relationships. I will analyze 2 different articles, one from Fox News and one from Healthline. I think this is really important because social media is becoming a big part in everyone's lives, and it's just the beginning. Social media will not die down anytime soon, and it's evident that it's making a big impact on what people do and how they act towards one another. And then I'll also use social networking to explain how the misuse of social media affects relationships. I think that does a really good job because it takes it from the bigger picture down to the individual actors. This is my annotated bibliography. The first one is something that I looked at because it talked about anxiety and jealousy in romantic relationships and how people misuse social media so that they can monitor their partner. That one had really good statistics, so that's what I used for that. The second one I used was just how many Facebook friends do you need, and I liked this one because she wrote from personal experience between her and her daughter. So she talked a lot about how younger generations are missing out on the valuable memories that she had, and like her daughter's missing out on it and all that. The third one I talked about was one of the main ones that I used, and this one was important to my research because it went into detail about how relationships and dating are affected by social media, specifically Facebook, and it also talked about like the more dangerous side of things rather than just being jealous or something in a relationship. It talked about more like legal issues that can come from it. And then the last one that I used is social media is killing your friendships, and this one discussed friendships rather than relationships, which I think is really important as well because the friendship part of things becomes an issue also. And it talked about how face-to-face contact is being replaced with social media and how that's hurting our relationships. So this is my theory. It's social networking theory, and it discusses how people interact with others in their social circle and why. It categorizes relationships by strong and weak ties, and social media can be thought of as the entire social media platform in this situation, and each node is a person. So in this picture that I put on here, you can see that there's different clusters, and then the small nodes are each a person. So I think the whole thing represents social media as a whole because you can, have an account and interact with other people even if you don't know them in other countries and all that. And then the small nodes are the people that are close to us. So it discusses how people act differently to the people who are closer to them, rather than the people that are further away from them. But everybody's still connected by one thing. And it just talks about how relationships are different with people in a variety of different proximities and different ties. So if you have a weak relationship with somebody, you're not going to interact with them the same way you'd interact with somebody you have a strong relationship with. And I think that social media can turn a lot of things into weaker ties, a lot of relationships into weaker ties. So that's also something to look at with this theory. One of the first articles I talked about is the Healthline article, and this one discusses friendships and social media. There's too many friends on social media. We tend to add a lot of people that we aren't really close to, and that can be an issue because we start to try to impress them and do things for them rather than just trying to use social media to connect with the people that we want to be closer to. And then oversharing as well. We tend to share our entire lives on social media, and that's not really healthy for us. And if we're sharing our whole lives on social media, then there's nothing we're really saving for the people that we're closest to find out. And then the author of this article said the time you invest in a relationship determines the strength of the relationship. And I think this is a big thing with social media because people tend to not invest as much time anymore into their relationships because they think that social media replaces the face-to-face interactions. So I think that that's a big thing because we're not investing the same amount of time into somebody as we normally would if we didn't have social media. So our relationships won't be as strong. And then that leads to the last point, which is social media is replacing face-to-face interactions. We think that commenting and liking and sharing posts among friends counts as interacting with them, but really we still need that human interaction to have a strong relationship, and social media is taking that away from us. And then negative responses to posts can weed out weak relationships. So a lot of times there are people who like to get in arguments and disagree with everyone, and I think if you're constantly disagreeing with somebody on your social media, then you're going to have a weaker relationship with them, because if you have a strong relationship with someone, you can kind of agree to disagree. So the solutions this article offered were to set boundaries, not add as many friends, and kind of set rules for the friends you do have so that nothing's getting out of hand or oversharing or, turning into jealousy or bullying. And then not letting social media replace human contact is another big thing. Just because, like I said earlier, we need that face-to-face contact, and if we're trying to replace that with social media, we're going to have weaker relationships. And then the Fox News article I talked about focused mainly on Facebook, and it talked about how there are 3 ways social media is hurting our relationships romantically. The first one is jealousy of others' relationships and milestones. That one's a big one because people are starting to focus on each other rather than focusing on their own relationships. So if you see somebody that you're friends with getting engaged or getting married or buying a house or having kids, then you're feeling the pressure to do the same. So it's taking away from what people actually want in the relationship and moving it towards just wanting to have that milestone to be able to brag about on social media. The second one is the problem of being Facebook official. I think this is one that wasn't really a problem until Facebook and other social media became really popular, because before you would just talk to your partner to discuss where you guys stood and how the relationship was going to be, but now it becomes an issue because if 2 people aren't on the same page or think something else of the relationship, then the other person's going to get upset about it and not actually talk about it. So I think it's really important to just communicate with your partner, and that's one of the solutions that was offered by this article. And then the last one is stalking, harassment, and monitoring. I think that's also becoming a really big thing in social media, and people aren't really understanding that it's bad to do to a partner. Checking up on Facebook accounts and looking at who they're friends with and what they're liking becomes really harmful to the relationship. And then also it applies to previous relationships, ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, all of that, because people have really easy access to other people's stuff now, so they're starting to keep up with them more, and that can not only hurt the 2 people involved, but also the current relationships that are happening. So the solutions offered by this article were to take a step back from social media and just focus on your actual relationships in person, instead of just what you're showing to the world, because it's not about that. And then communication with partner, like I said earlier, you have to understand, first of all, where you guys stand as a relationship, and then also what you're ready for, what you're ready to move on to. It doesn't just matter what your friends are doing, it matters about you. And then the stalking, harassment, monitoring, especially the monitoring for the communication with partner. You have to have trust and all that to have a solid relationship. So talking with your partner about things that are going on rather than looking at their social media to try to figure things out. So my analysis and conclusion, social media is hurting romantic relationships because it's being misused for the use of control. Like I talked about from that Fox article, people are using it to keep up with what their partner's doing on social media. And then social media can be good for means of entertainment and news, but the more it's misused, the more it's hurting relationships. So it just can't get out of hand. And then many people do not realize they're using social media in ways that harm their partner. 35% of people admit to checking their partner's social media daily, and 30% admit to checking their partner's accounts when they're suspicious. So that goes back to the communication and back to the misuse of social media, because it's harming the people involved, and the relationship's going to be weaker because they're going to social media instead of talking to their partner. And like the Healthline article was talking about, it's a good means of staying connected, especially to friends and family that we can't see on a day-to-day basis, like whether it be a distance barrier or something else like that. But it shouldn't replace face-to-face interaction. So if someone is replacing going out to lunch with their friends or something like that, with thinking that they can just comment on social media, then it won't end up in a strong relationship and will hurt everybody in the end. So basically, just social media is good for people, but if it's being misused in certain ways, then it can hurt people and hurt the relationships and make it weaker.